An atheist professor publicly mocked Jesus Christ, but one student's calm response left the entire classroom, stunned the lecture hall at Stanford University, hummed with low conversations, and the occasional shuffle of papers. Rows of students sat in anticipation, some eager to debate, others simply there for the required credit. At the front of the room, Professor Daniel Warren adjusted his blazer and leaned against the wooden podium, his lips curling into a smirk as he scanned the class. Warren was infamous on campus. He wasn't just a philosophy professor, he was a performer. Every lecture felt like a courtroom drama, and his favorite subject, religion, more specifically dismantling it, his students had seen it before, some wide-eyed believer walking into his trap, struggling to defend their faith, while he tore them apart with cold, precise logic. He thrived on it. Today the discussion had taken its usual turn. The topic on the syllabus, the fallacy of faith, why religion persists in an age of reason. Warren paced, gesturing dramatically. "We live in the 21st century," he said, his voice thick with amusement. "We have science, medicine, space travel. Yet millions of people still believe in a cosmic father figure who watches their every move." A few students chuckled, others nodded. A handful stared down at their desks, avoiding eye contact. But the real question, Warren continued, pausing for effect, is why bad things happen if this so-called loving God exists. He turned, his sharp gaze landing on someone near the back. Barron. The class quieted. Barron wasn't the type to stand out, tall but lean. He usually kept to himself, rarely speaking unless called upon. Unlike the others who crumbled under Warren's scrutiny, Barron never looked nervous. His dark eyes were steady, his expression unreadable. Warren grinned. He enjoyed a challenge. "Tell me, Barron," he said, his tone dripping with mock curiosity. "You're a believer, aren't you?" The class stirred. A few students glanced at each other, already anticipating what was coming next. Barron didn't move, didn't even blink. "I am." The professor's grin widened. "Fascinating. Maybe you can help me understand something. If Jesus is real, why do bad things happen? Why hasn't he proven himself?" The room tensed. Warren folded his arms, confident in his trap. He had asked variations of this question 100 times before, and the responses always played out the same way, stuttering circular reasoning, desperate appeals to faith. The class was watching. Waiting. Barron, however, didn't react the way they expected. He didn't rush to answer. He didn't fumble for a verse or quote scripture. He just sat there. His gaze locked onto Warren's, completely unshaken, but something in the air had shifted. Though no one could quite place why, the silence stretched longer than anyone expected. A few students shifted in their seats, exchanging glances. Professor Warren arched an eyebrow, intrigued. He had seen students freeze up before, scrambling for an answer they didn't have. But Barron didn't seem flustered. He just sat there composed, like he was waiting for something. Warren broke the silence first. No answer. He said, tapping his fingers against the podium, "That's what I thought." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Not from everyone, but enough. Barron finally moved. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the desk. "I never said I didn't have an answer," he said, his voice even. "I just don't think you're asking the right question." Warren's smile faltered for half a second, so quick most wouldn't have noticed. He recovered fast, tilting his head. "Oh, enlighten me." Barron didn't react to the sarcasm. Instead, he took a slow breath and said, "You keep asking why God lets bad things happen, but let's be real. What you're really asking is, why doesn't he stop them? Why doesn't he step in, take control, fix the world for us?" Warren clapped his hands together. "Exactly. Now we're getting somewhere," he pointed at Barron. "Let's say I'm on a train track and a train is coming right at me. You see me. You have the power to stop it, but you don't. What does that make you?" Barron tilted his head. "Are you saying we're all tied to train tracks?" More laughter. Warren smirked, but Barron kept going. "You're using a loaded scenario," Barron said. "If you see someone about to get hit by a train, stopping them is the clear moral choice, because they're powerless to stop it themselves. But life isn't that simple, is it? People have free will. If God intervened in everything, we wouldn't have free will. We'd be puppets. Warren chuckled, shaking his head. Ah, free will, the classic escape route. A few students laughed, but others seemed to hesitate. Let's follow that logic, Warren said, pacing again. So if a child gets sick and dies, is that just free will? If a man loses his wife in an accident, should he just shrug and say, oh, well, God didn't want to interfere? Barron exhaled like he was expecting that argument. That's not what I said. You're mixing up human choices with suffering. Some things happen because of people's decisions, violence, injustice, greed. Other things like illness or accidents remind us that life is fragile. Warren pounced, exactly fragile, random, chaotic, just like the universe. No divine plan, just chance. Barron shook his head. No, just because life has suffering doesn't mean it has no meaning. The class was quieter now. Even the students who had laughed earlier were listening more carefully. Barron continued, You keep asking why God doesn't stop bad things, but let's flip the question. Why does anything good happen at all? Why do people love? Why do they forgive? Why do they sacrifice for others? If the world is just chaos, why do we fight for something better? The professor opened his mouth to respond, but paused. For the first time in one of Warren's debates, it wasn't just the believer on the defensive, but Warren wasn't ready to let go of control just yet. Warren crossed his arms, his usual smirk still lingering, but something about Barron's answer had unsettled him.